Baldur's Gate 3 has been completely forgotten for over a year now, right? It's about a year ago to today where people started seeing through the lies and started realizing that Baldur's Gate was astroturfed and fake. And it's time to reflect on this because it's a really interesting situation. Quite unlike most other AAA shill shows, right? Because I think what they were trying to do early on in the year was that they were expecting Starfield to be this huge monumental hit. They were expecting that to be the game of the year, the game to be used to railroad Zelda and railroad Nintendo and downplay all their games that year, right? It was supposed to be this big, huge hit. And then it actually came out and was a complete and total flop. And so the industry had to rally. They had to well, what else could we come up with? Other than Mario and Zelda, what can we possibly talk about? And so they just kind of threw things at a dartboard until they hit Baldur's Gate 3, and they're just okay, this is our game of the year now. We're gonna have to give it all these game of the year awards. We're gonna have to give it all these perfect scores. We're gonna make this game a phenomenon. And then it comes out. Nobody cares about it. Nobody plays it. It sells 15 million units. 5 million less than Tears of the Kingdom. Less than Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Right. This game comes out. It's shilled. People buy it, they drop it really quickly. It's not that great, and they forget about it. And then the Game Awards comes along and does their little song and dance where they try and pretend no, it's a good game, guys, I swear. And everybody who knows anything about how the Game Awards operates, when you've seen Jeff Keighley speak out against Nintendo games before, when you see how much they downplay games like Tropical Freeze or Super Mario Bros. Wonder or everything else that's come out in the past decade, we all saw this coming, right? We all knew it was a possibility that Jeff could cuck and give awards to games that don't deserve them, right? This happens every year, right? But to this day, people will stand by Jeff Keighley's shill show as being the testament to reliable gaming journalism, right? They will seriously try and tell you that because Baldur's Gate 3 was given a Game of the Year award at the Game Awards 2023, that this is somehow some major vindication for it, that it's somehow an award-winning game, that the show actually means anything, that it has any impact at all, that the game somehow beat out Zelda in any way, shape, or form. It didn't, right? Of course, Larian was fired from the project soon after that. They will not be producing a Baldur's Gate 4, right? They've moved on, and their next game will not have nearly as much appeal because it won't be D&D related. Okay. And meanwhile, Nintendo, a year later, has already put out a new Zelda game that far surpasses everything Baldur's Gate 3 did, right? That's right. Baldur's Gate 3 got outdone by a sequel to the game they lost Game of the Year to, made by a C team at Nintendo, right? Not even the real B team, a straight up C team, third party dev that primarily works on Zelda ports, right? Baldur's Gate 3 got mogged by Zelda personally, right? She came out of, she rescued herself so she could come out and just show the plebs what for, right? And now we're in this weird coping session in regards to this, right? This is the big cope right now, is that nobody plays Echoes of Wisdom, nobody cares about it, nobody talks about it, but we saw with Astrobot that people talking about a game doesn't lead to long-term relevancy or sales, right? People bought Breath of the Wild after Tears of the Kingdom came out. People are buying Tears of the Kingdom after Echoes of Wisdom came out, right? These three games, and Link's Awakening, and I suppose Skyward Sword HD, these 5 excellent Nintendo Switch Zelda games are going to be far more relevant and successful than Baldur's Gate 3 ever will. Skyward Sword is a decade old now, and at the time, I think what everybody would have told you was that Skyrim was the best game ever made, Skyrim was the game of the year, Skyrim was this, it was everywhere back then. But now that Skyrim is over a decade old, it could not be more obvious that Skyward Sword was indeed the far superior game. It introduced a number of new iconic Zelda aspects. It introduced all these crazy new mechanics, introduce Fi, who's an iconic character now. A lot of these new elements have been incorporated into games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which are outperforming Skyrim. Zelda is a better and bigger IP than Skyrim will ever hope to be. Anything that Bethesda will ever produce. And we're still in this weird cycle where people don't want to admit it, right? People just want to sit and cope and siege, but Skyrim sold 60 million units. Yeah, after a decade and like dozens of re-releases, right? Like it's the same audience buying the game over and over again because it's Skyrim. Like again, when you compare that to something like Mario Kart 8, which sold about that much on one platform, the Nintendo Switch, you see a vast difference in quality and replayability in the amount of time spent in the game. I've spent a solid decade playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and most people drop Skyrim after the first month. I know people who couldn't even figure out that like weird claw puzzle at the beginning where you have to take that item out in the inventory and like rotate it around. That's the IQ level of the average person who plays Skyrim. They could not figure out the equivalent of a puzzle in a tutorial area in a Zelda game. Okay, that is what we're competing against. This is the audience that thinks Baldur's Gate 3 is the greatest game ever made, right? These people are completely delusional about what makes games great, what makes them worth playing, what makes them talked about, what makes them memorable, right? They don't know anything about gaming whatsoever. They are completely and totally coping about the long-term relevancy of Zelda, because it's kind of incredible looking at people like Spoonie who will try to tell you that Ultima is like the defining fantasy game ever made. No, it's not. Dragon Quest was bigger, right? Zelda is bigger, and those series are continuing to this day. When was the last time you played a new Ultima game? Ultima 9? When was that? Like the 90s? I don't even know when Ultima 9 came out. But you're gonna tell me that Ultima is some like major cornerstone RPG game when nobody today seems to have played it or have any access to it at all, right? The only people who care about Ultima are Spurgs who want to downplay the long-term relevancy and popularity of better series like Final Fantasy. Like again, it's all just a big cope. People don't like admitting that Japanese game devs are just better. Okay, people don't like admitting that they lost the console war and that Nintendo reigns supreme, and they'll whip out any like irrelevant fraud, low budget, low effort slop they possibly can to keep the masses distracted for a while Nintendo puts out yet another banger. Right, again, all year this has been happening. Princess Peach Showtime, better than Baldur's Gate 3. Unicorn Overlord, better than Baldur's Gate 3. Echoes of Wisdom, better than Baldur's Gate 3. Right, it's not just Tears of the Kingdom that's better than Baldur's Gate. It's essentially every Nintendo game ever produced, right? More people are playing Super Mario Bros. Right now than will ever play Baldur's Gate. Ever.